Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Gunatitamānam chidanandarupam chidabhasakam sarvagam dhyanaghamyam munidhyeyam paresham parabrahma rupam ganesham bhajema. Team Param Vedanta extends a warm welcome to one and all for today's 67th session of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. Friends, Lord Krishna in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita says, of the 12 months of Hindu calendar, I am Margashira Masa, which is also known as Dhanur Masa or Shunya Masa, which is from 5th December to 2nd January 22nd. And this is considered highly auspicious for Hindus, particularly followers of Lord Vishnu. In Sanskrit, Dhanus means bow, the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, and it is called Shunya Masa because it is generally advised not to conduct any auspicious occasions like marriages, Griha Pravesham, etc., but to dedicate the whole month to prayers, rituals, homas, for us to immerse ourselves in divine thoughts. Besides worshipping Lord Vishnu, Goddess Lakshmi, in this auspicious month, even Surya Bhagwan, Lord Hanuman, Lord Kartikeya are specially worshipped during the month. Purnami or full moon day of the month is celebrated as Datta Jayanti. Sri Dattatreya, born to sage Atri and Anusuya, is believed to be a boon of the three lords Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. The festivals in Margashira month, Subramanya Shashti, Mitra Saptami, Vaikunta Ekadashi or Mukkota Ekadashi, Gita Jayanti, Margashira Purnami, Datta Jayanti, Hanuman Vrata, Dhanur Masa Dvadashi. During such an auspicious period, we are blessed to be studying the Holy Bhagavad Gita. Today, the gist of the 9th chapter shall be explained by our team of Param Vedanta teachers, Srimati Neeta Podar, Srimati Meenakshi, Dr. Ahalya, Dr. Sanjay Banakal, and Dr. Komal Prasad, under the guidance of our revered Dr. Timmappa Hegde, who will give us the introduction and key insights. Today, we have a special chanting of Sri Suktam by Dr. Ravi Shankar Dattatri. Let us all listen and benefit from the auspicious vibrations of this chanting on this holy period, during this holy period. Today's revision is an opportunity for us to crystallize our understanding and to practice in life with firm conviction the teachings of the Lord of this important 9th chapter. Over to you, Dr. Timmappa Hegde, sir.
Thank you, Shiv Kumar, for a good introduction. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. We have concluded the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it is our practice to re-look at the entire chapter in one class and see what is the essence, what is the take-home message, why Shri Krishna has glorified this chapter as Raja Vidya, the royal knowledge, and also the royal secret. So that means hidden in these verses of this chapter, and perhaps also in the subsequent chapters, because right here he says, I'm going to reveal the highest secret, the royal secret. And therefore, let us look into the revision of these verses to see what is the secret, or what are the secrets that Shri Krishna is going to reveal. Because as you come to the 15th chapter, because the 15th chapter is the climax of the Bhagavad Gita, where most of the messages have already been given, and Shri Krishna repeats there, Iti guhyatamam shastram idam uktam mayanaga. I have given this, I have revealed to you. That means between the 9 and 15, we have to be very, very sensitive to each of the verses to see what is the secret Shri Krishna wants us to reveal. After giving that glorious introduction, immediately in verses 4 and 5, Maya tatamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina. Shri Krishna immediately takes off and speaks the Upanishadic language about his true nature being all pervasive. And in the 5th verse, he gives the essence of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, to say that the true nature is of a higher order of reality compared to the world within. And all this from the 4th, 5th up to the verse 10, which we will hear again in today's class. You will see the language is the language of the Upanishads. In our tradition, all students are required to study the Bhagavad Gita, which is also called the Smriti Prasthanam. And this is the fundamental source book for Vedanta, because this is by itself so beautiful, so musical, so poetical, so complete. However, at some stage, the students will have to go to the source book of the Gita, that is the Upanishads, that is the Shruti Prasthanam. And immediately after this text, that means before we go into the 10th chapter, we are going to go to the first section, the first kanda, and look at the verses of the Mundaka Upanishad. So right after this, the very next class, we will be having a proper systematic verse by verse study of one Upanishad, which is like, it is recommended. This is the first Upanishad that we have to study, because this is gives the essence of all the Upanishads. But for students who want to go a little higher, we have the Brahma Sutra, which gives the rationale, especially for all the seemingly contradictory verses that we study, both in the Gita and in the Upanishads. The Upanishadic wisdom or Vedanta is considered to be an extremely rare knowledge. Why is this knowledge considered to be very rare? Why is it not available to everybody? Because 3 things are difficult to get. It is extremely difficult to find a student. It is extremely difficult to find the teacher. And the next problem is the topic. The subject that we are dealing with is also extremely difficult. But I want to ask you one question. Between the student, between the teacher, and between the subject, which is the most rare commodity altogether? The clue is there in the picture of Nachiketa. To get a student who is really interested in the Gita and in the Upanishads, who is willing to make a certain commitment in their life that I'm going to study this in detail, is extremely difficult. That means those of us who are listening to these classes are those rare ones who are available. And because the teachers I know are there in plenty. We have a lot of extremely very good teachers, and the subject has been brought very nicely by our forefathers and by the Guru Parampara. Both these are available. But if we are able to discover students who are available, and that's our job, to look in our own family and friends to see how we can bring this message to more and more people, because this Upanishadic wisdom is extremely rare, because it is extremely difficult to find a student who is willing to study the Upanishads. Now, the teacher should have 2 qualifications. It is called, she should be a Shrotriya. What is a Shrotriya? One who has understood the scriptures and one who has the ability to communicate to a student. This is difficult. But if the third part is the most difficult, Brahmanishta. Brahmanishta means the teacher is not separate from Brahman. The teacher is an enlightened one. Such enlightened teachers are there, fortunately, like our Guru, but they are extremely rare. But even if you have a Shrotriya, one who has understood and one who is able to communicate, our teacher says that is also good enough. The student should have the 4 basic qualifications: Tivra Mumukshutvam, Viveka, Vairagya, and the readiness to go through the 6 disciplines, Samadhi, Shakta, Sampatti. If that is there, that is the required qualification of the student. What is the subject? What is the object that we are going to study on? All the Upanishads dwell on, it is all centered on Brahman. Whenever the focus of any text, even in the Upanishads, even in our Bhagavad Gita, wherever you see verses focusing on Brahman and Brahman alone, we have been referring to them as the goalpost verses, which talk about our true nature. So you will see in every chapter, you will have one or two or few of these verses, and whenever we come to them, we will highlight them and tell them these are the Upanishadic aspects of. I have put a picture of Brahmaji, the creator, and to say that these are two different things, because Brahmaji comes from the realm of the created. He is the firstborn, whereas Brahman is not born. It comes under the domain of the infinite. 6 questions that we need to be very clear on, or we need to know what we need to work on. What is this Brahman that all the Upanishads talk about? Where is this Brahman? Let me go find it. Is it through a certain amount of pilgrimage that I can find Brahman? What is my relationship to Brahman? What is this nature of this knowledge? Because our teachers say this is different from any other kind of education that you have been to. It is different. Why is it different? How do I get this knowledge? And of course, all of us want to know what is the benefit of getting this knowledge. What is Brahman? Now, Brahman can be seen in two. One is its Swarupa, its natural, its innate nature. The word Brahman means infinite, the big. Literally translated means the big. It actually means infinite. So 3 aspects of Brahman, and it's called Sat, Chit, and Ananda or Ananta. The key word is Ananta, limitless. So limitless Sat, which means existence, limitless consciousness, and that is the nature of Brahman. For the time being, it may be just words and words, but we need to meditate on these words, that Brahman is the infinite, all-pervading principle which lends existence to everything, which is of the nature of consciousness. And the word Ananda also means Ananta. This is called the Tatastha Lakshana, from its effect. The effect is Brahman is the cause of this entire universe. So whatever I see, including myself, I have come from Brahman. So Brahman has got 2 aspects. One is called the Swarupa and the other is called the Tatastha. So the Tatastha, or the incidental, is that from which all things are born, that from which all are sustained, that unto which all things can go. Unless we have these 6 questions clear in our mind, the world of the Upanishads become difficult because we do not know what we are studying. Now, where is this Brahman located? If we are searching for something which is infinite, it must be everywhere. It is all pervading. If it is all pervading, it must be there in myself. And whenever we refer to myself, we point out to the region of the heart. It is there. If you want to locate or if you want to find it, it is there. We say in the cave of one's own heart. If you want to say where is Brahman located, Brahman is everywhere. But if I have to identify it, I'm going to identify it in the cave of my heart. So first is I know the nature of Brahman. I know it is where it is located. What is my relationship to Brahman? Brahman is the cause, and this is the teaching of all the Upanishads. All the Upanishads come to a Mahavakya to say that Brahman, that 10th man that you are looking for, is none other than you yourself. And therefore, at some stage, we need to be able to identify that my real nature is none other than that infinite Brahman. This body-mind complex, which I normally relate to, is only a medium through which I interact, and it has nothing to do with that infinite Brahman. What is the nature of this knowledge? And this comes from 3 terms that we should know. What is Paroksha and what is Pratyaksha? Now, if I am not able to see something because it is not immediately available, but I get indirect knowledge about an object like Niagara Falls or Mount Kailash through various sources of information like the internet, I see all these images, all these indirectly obtained information because I have not got it directly through my sense organs. When it is indirectly available, in Sanskrit, such knowledge is called Paroksha Jnanam. Is Brahman Paroksha? The answer is no. Is Brahman Pratyaksha? That means, is Brahman something that I can directly experience through intense form of meditation or through the Guru Kripa? our teachers say, no, it is not an object to be experienced, even though none of my senses or my mind have access to Brahman. So Brahman is not Paroksha, Brahman is not Pratyaksha. Then the term used is called Aparoksha. What is Aparoksha? Brahman is neither Paroksha, neither Pratyaksha. That means Brahman is not an object. If Brahman is something that is existent and it is not an object, my conclusion should be, it should be the very subject, myself. And that subjective knowledge in Sanskrit is called Aparoksha. And when I get to know that very subject as myself, it is called Aparoksha Jnanam. What is the method of knowing Brahman? How do I get to know this knowledge? I need a teacher, someone, as I said, a Shrotriya Brahmanishta. I go to such a teacher and the teacher will speak it out. When I listen to it, it is called Shravanam. But it's difficult to believe all this. The teacher will address all kinds of doubts. And when I've cleared all my doubts, that is called Mananam. And finally, when I understand that I'm not somebody ordinary, I'm somebody so extraordinary, and for years or so many lives, I have believed I am somebody limited, it becomes difficult for me to accept it. It takes some time. There are certain habitual notions which are difficult to take. And there is a certain practice that I need to do after getting clear knowledge, doubt-free knowledge. That process is called Nididhyasanam. What is the benefit of getting knowledge? Benefit of getting knowledge is the highest form of fulfillment because I experience Purnatvam. I suddenly realize there is no death for me, there is no birth for me, there is no rebirth. This is what is called moksha or freedom. And this is the benefit of getting this knowledge. The Upanishad that we are going to study next will be the Mundaka Upanishad. And all these Upanishads begin with a sense of a dialogue between a teacher and a student. And the Upanishad, we will see in the next class, it opens with such a brilliant question. The question is, Bhagavan, that's how a student comes and addresses the teacher. What is that knowing which everything becomes known? And the teacher, this Upanishad will focus more on the Sat principle, on the existent principle. When you say, I am, when you say, I am existent, what is this existence? And that we will understand more clear in Mundaka Upanishad, although the consciousness aspect is also explained. But the consciousness is better explained in another delightful Upanishad called Kena Upanishad. I am conscious. I can see, I can hear, I can smell, I can taste. Who is there within me? And when you study this Upanishad, it looks like it's like a medical approach to understanding of how we get to know things. And the Chit aspect is very nicely brought out in Kena Upanishad. There is another Upanishad called the Chandogya Upanishad, where the student is Narada, the teacher is Sanat Kumara, who's none other than an avatara of Lord Subramanyam. So whenever I see Lord Subramanyam, I see him as a Brahma Vidya Acharya. And Narada, who is the brother, goes to his older brother and says, I have all the knowledge in the world, but I don't have a sense of fulfillment. That anantatvam, that bhuma vidya, that limitlessness of my own nature is communicated by Sanat Kumara, which is also done in Mundaka Upanishad that we are going to study next. The Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads. We know this, and we chant this Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandana Partho Vatsa Sudhe Bhokta Dugdam Gitamrita Mahat. If we study the Bhagavad Gita itself, we have the essence of all the Upanishads. But at some stage, we need to take that step where we will go into the source book, and from the next class, and which incidentally we have not planned it. So the New Year Eve begins with a systematic study. And why am I emphasizing this is, make your own effort to look at the first Mundaka, the first Kanda, at least the first 6 or 7 verses. Make your own effort to see whatever sources of knowledge, let these mantras come. And then when our teachers explain these verses to you, then you will say, yes, I get it. Hari Om. Thank you. Today's class, we summarize the entire 9th chapter, and the opening speaker will be Neeta. Over to you, Neeta.
Thank you, sir. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. In chapter 8, Krishna has described what happens to the Saguna Ishvara Upasaka. This seeker meditates on the Lord with qualities. He perceives a difference between God and himself because of differences in attributes. God is perfection, I am imperfection. God is great, I am miserable. This is Bheda Jnanam, Dvaita Jnanam. This devotee, for various reasons, cannot get to Nirguna Ishvara Upasana, to Advaita. But yet, he too will move towards enlightenment. However, he will recognize his freedom only at a later period of time, after he reaches Brahmaloka and receives knowledge there. This seems a much tougher, longer journey and is also difficult to verify. In chapter 9, Krishna comes back to Vedanta Vichara. Being established in this wisdom will help recognize freedom here and now. This bhakta will realize through Shravanam, Manana, and Nididhyasanam that Brahman alone is, and the world is not as real as it appears to be. I realize I am not a victim. The world, including my body, mind, my relations, my transactions, cannot victimize me. Verses 1 to 3 are introductory verses, like advertisement to what Krishna will be revealing in the 9th chapter. In verse 1, Krishna says, I shall teach you a secret knowledge. He uses the superlative tense, guhyatamam. It is the rarest and the greatest secret. Krishna starts the chapter with idam. Why does Krishna use a pronoun? Using a pronoun means like you're continuing with a previously discussed topic. And that is exactly what Krishna is doing. He's presenting the same knowledge he had described earlier in chapter 7, Jnana Vijnana Yoga. He has also described it in many verses in chapter 2, 4, and so on. Therefore, the term idam, this. Then Krishna calls Arjuna Anusuya over here. Anusuya means not Asuya. Swamiji says, take it as one who doesn't have fault-finding tendencies, one who's not critical. And Arjuna has this unique qualification. It's not that Arjuna doesn't have doubts. He has, and he places them in front of Krishna with firm faith and devotion. Then Krishna says, he will teach us Jnanam and Vijnanam. He will give the whole picture, Saguna Ishvara and Nirguna Brahman. From Eka Rupa to Aneka Rupa to Arupa, Krishna will reveal that there is a existence consciousness principle, Brahman, with no attributes, Brahman Asti. And further, he will teach to claim, I am that very existence consciousness principle. Aham Brahman Asmi. This wisdom will help us to comfortably move from the triangular format to the binary format. Understand Vyavaharika reality and Paramarthika reality. And therefore, Krishna says, Jnanam Vijnanam Nyatvat Mokshase Ashubhat. Being established in this full Jnana Vijnana will free us from inauspiciousness. We will be rid of all the troubles of samsara nivritti. In verse 2, Krishna is promoting this knowledge, the Jnana Vijnanam he will be giving in this chapter. He uses 7 different adjectives. Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. It's a royal secret, the most sacred, very private and royal like kings. It is unavailable for most. In fact, it can continue to be a secret even after years of study. The one teaching this knowledge is a wonder, and the one who can get it is yet another wonder. Uttamam Pavitram, highest purifier. This knowledge removes all impurities, even psychological impurities like Raga, Dvesha, Kama, Krodha, and the worst impurity of all, ignorance. Uttamam, once internalized, in future, we will not acquire these impurities. Then he says, Pratyaksha Avagamam. Pratyaksha Avagamam means the benefit can be directly experienced here and now. This is not a mere theoretical study. One can get many practical benefits: peace, security, happiness, no more grumbling or restlessness. Dharmyam. A person who has assimilated this knowledge will always be dharmic, lead a moral and ethical life in keeping with Vedantic teaching. A Brahmanyani will never intentionally violate dharma. Vedanta and dharma are complementary. Swamiji says, if you think I am beyond papam and punyam, beyond dharma and adharma, I need not lead a moral or ethical life, then this knowledge has not been understood. Swamiji says, never ever choose Vedanta at the expense of dharma. Susukham kartum. This knowledge is very easy to pursue, but only for the prepared mind. Compared to Krama Mukti, Jivan Mukti seems far easier. Avyayam, it is inexhaustible, imperishable, permanent, eternal knowledge. Such is the glories of Brahmanyanam. In verse 3, Krishna tells us what happens to those who don't have faith in this knowledge. He says, if you don't have Shraddha, then this knowledge will not work for you. It will not internalize. You won't see any change in the attitude towards the world, towards the body-mind complex, towards death. And thus, you will continue in samsara. Krishna says, aprapya mam, you will not reach me. The importance of bhakti, bhav, and shraddha is being stressed here. Krishna will now reveal the central theme of this chapter, the Nirguna Ishvara Swarupam. Dhanyavad, Hari Om.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The eternal, unmanifested self, Nirguna Ishvara Tattvam, which forms the essential substratum for the creation of this world, is now being described in the following verses by the Lord. His teachings from verse 4 to 10 reveal the highest wisdom and his glories that inspire reverence, devotion, and awe. The Lord teaches Arjuna the most secret knowledge, that is the real, higher nature of the Lord, which is known as Paraprakriti, which is attributeless or formless. His lower nature is known as Aparaprakriti or Maya. He is beyond the fivefold properties consisting of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. Thus, he is not tainted by any impurities. So the Lord is Asangaha. The Lord says he is the ultimate cause of the universe. Everything is sustained by him. He is transcendental and beyond the senses and mind. We are not able to see him because our senses are preconditioned to only perceive names and forms. Coming to the verses, in verses 4, 5, and 6, Krishna uses the term Matsthani, which means all living beings rest in him. Thus, he becomes Mithya Jagat Adhishtanam. In verse 4, Shri Krishna makes 3 core points. The entire universe is pervaded by his unmanifest state, that all beings abide in him, that he is not based in them. Pervasiveness is the nature of the subtle. All pervasive alone can be eternal and infinite. All those that have forms are perishable substances. So, the self, in its essential unmanifest nature, must be pervading the entire creation, just as the mud pervades all forms and shapes in a mud pot. Thus, Krishna's Avyakta Rupam is woven through the whole world, and everything dwells in him. Matsthani Sarva Bhutani, but not he in them. Na chaham teshvavastitaha. He is not supported by the world. Shloka 5. In this, the first line says, all beings do not reside in me, which contradicts the statement in the previous shloka, which says, all beings are in me only. Though the Lord is the creator of this universe, he cannot be contained nor exhausted by it. From Vyavaharika angle, the world is real and exists in him. But from Paramarthika angle, there's only seemingly existent world, which are not in him. This is because of his Yoga Maya, the divine energy of the Lord, that is higher nature of the Lord. A common example given to understand this is, even though a beam of light conveys and sustains motion picture scenes on a movie screen, with all its varieties and contrasts, the beam itself undergoes no transformations. Similarly, the motion pictures of creation do not disturb the Lord's originating beam. In verse 6, the Lord gives an analogy to enable Arjuna to grasp the concept. The wind has no existence independent from the sky. Though it moves furiously, yet it rests within the sky. Likewise, Atma has no existence independent of God. Everything that exists in the universe is subordinate to the will of God. It is created, maintained, and annihilated in accordance with his will. Verses 7 and 8 explain the Jagat Karanatvam of Brahman, that is the process of creation and annihilation. Kalpakshaye means at the end of Brahma's lifespan. On the completion of Brahma's lifespan, the entire cosmic manifestation or Srishti dissolves and goes into an unmanifest state. The Pancha Mahabhutas merge into Prakriti. Prakriti, a synonym of Maya, is the root cause of this whole creation. However, Prakriti or Mother Nature is functional only when Ishvara wills it. It does not have independent existence. It cannot operate without the power and guidance of the unmanifested divine Lord. The Lord activates or enlivens Prakriti, and in turn, it shows its brilliant, dazzling glory of creation n number of times. It acts like Ishvara's projector that tracks the karmas or actions of each and every being in the world. It is dissolved at the end of every kalpa. A kalpa is 1 day of Brahmaji, the creator, which is calculated as 4.32 billion years. Again, at the start of another kalpa, the Lord awakens Mother Nature and causes her to resume her creation. These cycles of evolution and dissolution are eternal. So Krishna says, Aham punah punah visrujami. In verse 9, the Lord says, Tani karmani mam na nibadnanti. Even though the Lord is the creator of the universe, he is not bound by the act or karma. He is detached or indifferent. Udasinavat asinam. He remains an onlooker, an impartial witness. Although he is the sole doer, master of the universe, he has no egoism and hence remains a free, disinterested spectator. In verse 10, Sri Krishna concludes the topic of Prakriti and its mechanism by reasserting that Prakriti is subservient to Ishvara. He describes Ishvara as the supervisor or Adhyaksha. Ishvara's mere presence enables Prakriti to function, just like a light in the house enables all the activities in the house to be carried on. Then he says, Hetu nanena jagad viparivartate. Because of my sheer presence alone, the entire universe revolves, meaning under his direction, Srishti and Laya happens. Thus, Sri Krishna imparts this absolute knowledge to Arjuna, which illumines all other knowledge. Thank you, sir. Hari Om.
Namaste. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We heard the Akarta Abhokta Swarupam of Ishvara from verse 4 to 10. In the 11th verse, Krishna talks of Samsara Karanam. And from the 12th to 19th verse, he talks of Samsara Nivritti Upayaha or Mokshopayaha. And the means given here is Bhakti, the central theme of this chapter. Now, why do we have problems? Because we expect permanence from the impermanent, security from the insecure, Purnatvam or Ananda, finite, infinite from the finite. Ajnanam is the cause for all suffering, as we have been understanding from day one. In fact, Krishna has often said that in the earlier chapters, like in the 5th chapters, as Ajnanena Avritam Jnanam Tena Mukhyanti Jantavaha. Because we are steeped in ignorance of our true nature, we suffer like Jantavaha, or the miserable creatures, as he calls us. We are ignorant about the Parambhavam, or the Nirguna Swarupam, which is formless beyond time and space. And we hold on to the human form of God and do not move beyond that many times. There's nothing wrong in holding on to a personal form of God. Saguna Upasana is best to begin with, but that should culminate in Nirguna Upasana. In the 12th verse, Krishna talks of the confused and unfortunate people whose thinking is not clear. They do not have the right knowledge, neither the right guidance, and therefore suffer in samsara. Vichetasaha. People who have no Viveka Shakti, whose Sattva Guna is overpowered, they suffer in samsara. When Jnana Shakti is wrong, Ichcha and Karma also go wrong. So wrong understanding leads to wrong desires. Desires born out of Kama or Raga lead to actions in wrong direction. A strong warning for us to avoid wrong identification in this verse. In the 13th verse, Krishna offers some hope. Some Mahatma who are steadfast in their religious practices, like regular prayer, practicing Panchamahayajnas, following a dharmic way of life based on the scriptures, such a person over constant practice becomes Sattva Pradhana and develops Nityanitya Vastu Viveka. Sooner or later, one understands that everything other than God is perishable and that God alone is the abode of Ananda. Realizing that godliness, Brahma Swarupa, is the key to permanent happiness. In the 14th verse, he unfolds how do the sadhakas pursue such goals. Dhrida Vrataha, as he says, Dhrida Vrataha, being steadfast with firm resolve, Satatam Kirtayantaha, remembering their goals often by being in the company of such people, Satsanga for short. Even as such sadhakas prepare with effort, yatnataha, with karma and upasana, they know that unless there is Ishvaranugraha, the journey further is not easy. So, surrender, namasyantaha, as the shloka says, indicates the role of grace. The 15th verse explains the evolution of understanding of God in 3 levels. God as the creator of the world, the usual image that we have for God. God becomes the world or manifests as the world, the second form. This universe is the form of the Lord. As we have heard earlier, Rasoham Apsu Kaunteya, or Prabhasmi Shashi Suryayoho, I am that which is manifest. And then we move on to understand the 3rd level, that all manifest and unmanifest is the Lord. Many questions crop up when we hear this, the Arupa Avastha. But Shastra says the Lord does not become the creation. He appears as the creation. So Ekarupa, Anekarupa and Arupa Ishvara Jnanam. Anyemam Ekatvena Upasate. He continues this saying, Aham Kratur, Aham Yajnaha, in the 16th verse, where Krishna elaborates on the Vishwarupa Bhakti or Vishwarupa Ishvara Varnanam, learning to look at everything in the creation as the manifestation of the Lord. In fact, the seeds of Vishwarupa Varnanam starts from here, which leads us to the next chapter, the Vibhuti Yoga. In the 16th one, he says, I am the Yajna, the offering, the food, Oshada. Oshada is actually food. Oshada is food, which comes from the word Oshadhi, the plant kingdom. I am the fire, the Ajya. In short, I am everything. Continuing in the same spirit in the 17th verse, Krishna says, I am the father, the mother, the grandfather, the dispenser of this universe. I am the one to be known. I am the auspicious one. I am the Pavitra Omkara. I am all the Vedas. He is saying that he is the Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karana. And continues the same stanza, in this 18th stanza, continues the same thought with greater emphasis that he, the Lord, is in everything as the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, the abode, the refuge. Well, anything, we just cannot exclude that he is not here. The shloka puts it beautifully. Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Nivasaha Sharanam Suhrit Prabhavaha Pralayaha Sthanam Nidhanam Bijamavyayam. So he says, I am the support, the repository, Nidhanam, and Bijamavyayam, the inexhaustible seed. Now, what does that leave out? In the 19th, he extends his form to the entire universe and summarizes saying, he is the sun and the rain, the manifest and the unmanifest, and he is the cause for immortality or otherwise. All the three levels of bhakti, Karma Lakshana Bhakti, Upasana Lakshana Bhakti, and Jnana Rupa Bhakti are mentioned in the verses from 12 to 19. They may not be manifest as soon as we take out the text, but the commentary, a guru's understanding, his teaching, definitely brings us to understand these levels of bhakti explained in these verses. Hari Om. Namaste.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Krishna is dealing with the topic of devotion in these verses. And now onwards, he'll be describing the type of devotion the people have depending on their motive. Swami Paramarthananda creates the devotion into three levels, starting from the lowest to the highest. At the lowest level is the selfish devotion, or it is also known as Sakama Bhakti or Manda Bhakti, where one worships God to achieve a material goal. Here, God is the means to achieve finite material goal. Krishna had previously described such a devotee as Artha Bhakta, the one who seeks God at the time of crisis, or Artharthi Bhakta, who worships God desiring material prosperity. Our love towards the goal is always of the highest order than the love towards the means. We love the means only till the goal is achieved. Hence, Sakama Bhakta loves material prosperity more than the God. So Krishna says there is nothing wrong in Sakama Bhakti, but it leads to spiritual stagnation. On the other hand, the next level is a selfless devotion, which is called as Nishkama Bhakti. The Nishkama Bhakta worships God to achieve the infinite. The means and the goal are the same. Hence, the love towards God is superior. This person is a discriminative person, and the solution, a discriminative person who knows the ephemerality of material comforts. And the solution for everlasting peace and happiness is the God or infinite. This type of devotion leads to rapid spiritual progression. So Paramarthananda says that the highest level of devotion or highest level of love is towards oneself. Thus, one who has realized God as himself is the highest devotee. He is a Abheda or Advaita Bhakta or a Jnani who has already attained God. Such a person has no desires further. So Krishna describes the first two types of devotion from verse number 20 to 29. In the verse number 20, he says, certainly a Sakama Bhakta gets heavenly pleasures by worshipping God. They have studied all the three Vedas, they performed all the complicated rituals, they are very rigid, but in the end, they desire finite results due to the lack of sheer discrimination. So in verse number 21, he says, even though they enjoy these heavenly pleasures, they are not eternal. So the results are finite. And when the results, when they exhaust their punya, these people will have to return back to the world of some mortals. Such people remain in the cycle of samsara, so they're stagnating in their spiritual progress. So on the other hand, in the verse number 22, he discusses about Nishkama Bhakti, wherein Krishna says that a person who keeps him as the goal and he will take care of his protection and well-being. He says, Ananyas chintayanto mam yajana paryupasate tesham nityabhiktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. And his Nishkama Bhakta is far superior to his Sakama Bhakta. In verse number 26, he says, Nishkama Bhakti is very simple. Krishna accepts anything. There are no rules are required. Even offering a leaf, a fruit, or a water is enough. On the other hand, rituals are very rigid for a Sakama Bhakta. Indiscriminate, foolish people take to this hard path to achieve only finite goals because they are ignorant of the higher nature of God. In verse number 27, Nishkama Bhakta Nishkama Bhakti is nothing but a karma yoga, wherein he says, whatever action you perform, yad karoshi, yad ashnasi, yad dadasi, you perform it as an offering to the God. So in verse number 28, he says, such a devotee will get out of the bondage caused by the results of action. In the verse number 29, he says, such a devotee resides in him and Krishna resides in that devotee, which means both are one. Such a devotee is the highest devotee, realized one, a jnani devotee. Thank you.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. From verse number 30 to 34, Shri Krishna completes his teaching by glorifying Bhakti, teaching us about the greatness of Bhakti. Bhakti can transform a person. Bhakti has got several layers. It's like a flight of stairs, steps. It's like a ladder. Begin from the lowest rung of the ladder, Karma Lakshana Bhakti, then Upasana Lakshana Bhakti, and then to Gnana Lakshana. Since it has many rungs, anybody can start Bhakti according to his level. Not that you must study Nirgunam Brahma right at the beginning. You need not start there. Start with Karma Yoga, which is easy. Even you can practice Sakama Karma, but dedicate it to the Lord. So anybody can start Bhakti, whatever be the level. If it is so easy, why do we suffer or hesitate to go further? The obstacles to climb up are guilt about our past, and thoughts about our inherent limitations. And Krishna very clearly says here, even if a person has been a very corrupt person, taken to all kinds of negative activities, even that person need not entertain guilt, because guilt is one of the most powerful obstacles. Guilt leads to diffidence, lack of self-confidence. And diffidence is the greatest obstacle, because if I am diffident, even if all the circumstances are favorable, no use. On the other hand, if I am confident, even if all others and even the circumstances are difficult, it will work. And therefore, spiritual sadhana requires self-confidence. Therefore, Krishna says, never have guilt. Once you have understood that your lifestyle has been unhealthy, decide to change. Make a resolution, and once you turn over a new leaf and decide to change, the very decision will make a saint. Sadhureva sa mantavyam. Sadhureva sa mantavyam. He becomes a saint. And not only that, as we see in the next slide, even inherent disadvantage does not matter. There may be some people who have got disadvantages because of their very birth, because of their parentage, because of their location. There can be people with inherent disadvantages, but even those people can practice bhakti and attain liberation. It is like various pawns in a game of chess. There is queen, bishop, knight, king, rook, pawns, each with their own capabilities and with their own limitations, which may be inherent or which may be because of the position they are in. But those limitations are pertaining to the game on the checkered board of black and white squares. For spiritual sadhana, where the goal is to transcend the realm of black and white, nama and rupa, beyond the realm of even good and bad, one needs to just get onto the ladder and ascend to reach the infinite. So start Get on to the ladder and ascend. Be a bhakta. And therefore, Arjuna, be a bhakta. And how to be a bhakta? He says in the last verse, the definition of a bhakta, beautifully presented here. He says, first, mad bhakta bhava. First, you learn to love me, at least for the sake of worldly goals. It does not matter. That's the first stage. Then in due course, learn to love me as the very goal itself. We have to understand the subtle difference between these two stages. In the first stage, Bhagavan is not the goal. Through Bhagavan, as a means, I want to achieve worldly ends. But in the next stage, Mad Parayanaham, keep me as the goal. Then the third stage is never forget this goal, Manmana Bhava. And the fourth stage is to convert your very life into a form of worship, taking you towards the goal, Madhyaji Bhava. And then the crucial final factor is even when you are progressing, remember the grace of the Lord which is required. Therefore, be humble. Mam Namaskuru. Never become arrogant because of your spiritual progress. Then like a snake and ladder game, the snake will take you down. Therefore, be humble. Seek the grace of the Lord. If these 5 factors are taken care of, you are my bhakta. And sooner or later, you will certainly attain me. Mameva ishyasi. So with this glorification of bhakti, Krishna concludes the 9th chapter. Hari Om. Thank you.
Rig Veda has this suktam to propitiate Goddess Lakshmi. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ataha Shri Suktam Hiranyavarnam Harinim Suvarna Rajatastrajam Chandram Hiranmayim Lakshmim Jatavedo Ma'avaha Tam Ma'avaha Jatavedo Lakshmi Manapagaminim Yasyam Hiranyam Vindeyam Gamashvam Purushanaham Ashwapurvam Rathamadhyam Hastina Adaprabodhinim Shriyam Devi Mupahvaye Shrirmam Devi Jushatam Kam Sosmitam Hiranya Prakaram Mardhvam Jalantim Triptam Tarpayantim Padme Stitam Padmavarnam Tamiho Pahvaye Shriyam Chandram Prabhasam Yashasa Jwalantim Shriyam Loke Devajushta Mudaram Tam Padminimim Sharanamaham Prapadhye Lakshmir Me Nashyata Tvam Vrune Aditya Varne Tapasodhijato Vanaspatestva Vrukshotha Bilvaha Tasya Phalani Tapasanu Dantu Mayantarayascha Bahya Alakshmi Upaitu Mam Devasakha Kirtischa Maninasaha Pradurbhutosmi Rashtresmin Kirti Mruddhim Dadatu Me Shutpipasa Malam Jeshtham Alakshmim Nashayam Yaham Abhutima Samriddhim Cha Sarvan Nirnuda Me Gruhat Gandhadvaram Duradharsham Nishtapushtam Karishanim Ishwarim Sarvabhutanam Tamiho Pahvaye Shriyam Manasakamakutim Vacha Satyamashīmahi Pashunam Rupamanyasya Mai Shri Shrayatam Yashaha Kardamena Prajabhuta Mai Sambhava Kardama Shriyam Vasaya Me Kule Mataram Padma Malinim Apasrujantu Snigdhani Chiklita Vasame Gruhe Nicha Devim Mataram Shriyam Vasaya Me Kule Ardhram Pushkarinim Pushtim Pingalam Padma Malinim Chandram Hiranmayim Lakshmim Jatavedo Ma'avaha Ardhram Yahkarinim Yashtim Shuvarnam Hema Malinim Suryam Hiranmayim Lakshmim Jatavedo Ma'avaha Tam Ma'avaha Jatavedo Lakshmi Manapagaminim यस्यां हिरण्यं प्रभूतं गावो दास्योश्वान विन्धेयं पुरुषानहम् पद्मप्रिये पद्मिनी पद्महस्ते पद्मालये पद्मदयालताक्षी विश्वप्रिये विष्णुमनोनुकूले तत्पादपद्मं मयि सन्निधस्त्वा लक्ष्मीं क्षीरसमुद्रराजतनयां श्रीरङ्गधामेश्वरीं दासीभूतसमस्तदेववनितां लोकैकदीपाङ्कुराम् श्रीमन्मन्दकटाक्षलब्धविभवब्रह्मेन्द्रगङ्गाधरां त्वां त्रैलोक्यकुटुम्बिनीं सरसिजां वन्दे मुकुन्दप्रियाम् सिद्धलक्ष्मीर्मोक्षलक्ष्मीर्जयलक्ष्मीर्सरस्वती श्रीलक्ष्मीर्वरलक्ष्मीश्च प्रसन्ना मम सर्वदा सर्वमङ्गलमाङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थसाधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके देवी नारायणि नमोऽस्तुते सरसिजनिलये सरोजहस्ते धवलतरांशुकगन्धमाल्यशोभे भगवति हरिवल्लभे मनोज्ञे त्रिभुवनभूतिकरी प्रसीद मह्यम् महालक्ष्मी च विद्महे विष्णुपत्नी च धीमहि तन्नो लक्ष्मी प्रचोदयात्। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम।
Hearty thanks to our beloved Dr. Timoppa Hegde sir and all the teachers of Param Vedanta for your superb presentations, and Dr. Ravi Shankar Dattatri for your divine, wonderful recitation of Sri Suktam, invoking the blessings of Mother Mahalakshmi on this auspicious Dhanurmasa for all creation. Thank you, participants, for joining us in today's study. Today, we have completed the verse-by-verse study of the 9th chapter. Our beloved Dr. Timoppa Hegde sir has already introduced us to the subject of the next 68th session, which is going to be on the 31st December, where we shall be studying the Prathama Kanda, section 1 of Mundaka Upanishad. This is one of the major Upanishads. Remember to join and benefit from the teachings of this wonderful, important Upanishad. This Upanishad is the source for the phrase Satyameva Jayate. Friends, all of you must have enjoyed our Gita Jayanti program. Firstly, on behalf of Team Param Vedanta, I would like to thank every one of you for your generous voluntary contribution to the collective Guru Dakshina to be offered to our Gurus on the holy occasion of Gita Jayanti. Kindly update your details on the Google Forms using the link provided in our message. 100% of the contributions received towards the Guru Dakshina shall be offered to our Gurus as Guru Dakshina from all of us. Let me conclude by expressing once again our Dhanyavada to all of you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.